This week.
Yeah. All right. It is 11:15, so we are going to get started. Thank you guys for coming, and I just want to remind you that we are having lunch back in Lahutsky 257 afterwards if you guys want to come. But I'll let Lily take it from here.
Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Thea Hagen, for helping organize this event logistically while I remotely email people from Pennsylvania. So my name is Dr. Lily Langlois, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm an ornithologist, hence my connection with Dr. Lanham, and I teach for the online Masters of Wildlife Fisheries Research program. So it is my honor today to introduce my friend, colleague, and mentor, Dr. Drew Lanham. He is an author, poet, and wildlife biologist. He earned his bachelor's and master's in zoology, and then later a doctorate in forest resources here at Clemson. Since then, he's been teaching in the FEC department for over 20 years. So he holds an endowed chair position as an alumni distinguished professor, and he was named the alumni master teacher in 2012. In that time here at Clemson, he's mentored over 50 graduate students. He teaches courses in conservation ornithology, wildlife conservation policy, hunting and wildlife management, and multiple creative inquiries on ornithology and citizen science. So his work strives to understand how forest management impacts wildlife and how human beings talk about nature. Specifically, he's really trying to translate conservation science to make it more relevant to others in ways that are evocative and understandable. And if you've ever read his works, that's exactly what he does. So he's a widely published author and award-nominated poet, writing about his experience as a birder, hunter, and wild wandering soul. His first book, The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature. This is fantastic. I took the recommendation by others at the previous Tide conference from last year to get it on Audible so you can hear him tell his own story in his own words, and it's fantastic. His second book, Sparrow Envy, A Field Guide to Birds and Lesser Beasts, also fantastic, very evocative. And he has many more works coming. He's a busy man. So coming soon is Joy in the Justice We Give Ourselves. Another one is Range Maps, Birds, Blackness, and Loving Nature in Between the Two. And then he has several children's titles coming out, The Bird I Became, and Home Place Hues, which I can't wait to share with my children. But he's well known both locally, regionally, and nationally. And he's all over YouTube. Just look, there's every single conservation organization has highlighted him at some point. So National Geographic, the Nature Conservancy, Cornell Lab of Ornithology, National Audubon Society, NPR Story Corps. His reach is so wide and so far that he reached my dear sweet mom in upstate New York. Not just once, but twice. The first time he was on NPR Story Corps, and then this February he was featured on the PBS Evening News Hour, and my mom called me up so excited. So he has a long list of accolades, and I'm just going to highlight a few. So 2019 National Audubon Society's Dan Lufkin Prize for Environmental Leadership. 2020 E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Award for Outstanding Science Advocacy, which is so important. And then I would say 2022 was a stellar year for Dr. Lanham. First, he was listed among 2022's, he was the Poet Laureate Fellowship by the Academy of American Poets. Later that year, he was listed among the 2022's most influential Black Americans, alongside of icons such as Michelle Obama, Serena Williams, and Questlove. This is on the Route 100 list. And let me tell you, there's very few STEM academics on that list, but he made it. And the metrics are not biased. It's all about algorithms, your influence, Twitter, all of those social media. But most importantly, and most monumentous, in 2022, he was granted the Genius Grant from the MacArthur Foundation. The first person at Clemson to ever receive this award. He's one of very few in South Carolina to receive this award. I call it a life-changing award, because if it doesn't change your life, nothing else could. And when our Dean of Capitals wrote an email to all of the faculty and staff in Capitals, he wanted to congratulate Drew last semester, and I am just going to read a couple of his words. He wasn't able to make it today, but here's what he said about Drew. When I read it, I was like, yes, it's so true, so heartfelt, and he really knows Drew as a person. He wrote, quote, Drew stands out amongst our faculty, not only because of his achievements and his recognition or his extensive knowledge and experience, but because he's one of those rare individuals who leads from the heart. His passion for his craft and his beliefs is special. I am very honored to call him a colleague and proud to have him as a member of the Capitals family, end quote. And I couldn't agree more with Dean Bella. So with that, please welcome Dr. Drew Lanham.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Thea, for making this possible. Can everyone hear me? So many family, friends, students. It's a little overwhelming, so I'm going to try to get through this without being too self-evocative, really, and move through something that I think is important. And that is story. I mean, we all have stories. One of my mantras is that everybody has a bird story, whether it's the chicken you ate last night or the pigeon that decided your car should not be clean. Those are bird stories. And so birds have been a conduit for my life and expressing pretty much every part of it. And so I want to share that, but I think it's important in light of what Lily has done. This person who, 3 years ago I didn't know, from far away, who has really given me a floor to talk about how, right? We can talk about questions. As scientists, we talk about proximate questions, right? And we talk about ultimate causation. So that's how and that's why. And one of the things that has fallen kind of to me pretty clearly is that few people talk about how to do this work. Few people talk about how to do this work. I mean, we stand in front of students who sort of see us sometimes as mysterious, other times as some other thing. And then graduate students us with their presence because they see the work that we do, and there's something about what we do that they want to learn from. And university becomes sort of a widget factory. I want us to rethink widgets. I want us to rethink what it is that we do, what it is we're tasked with, what it is that we're actually honored with doing at a so-called seminary of higher learning. So this will be a little bit of a multimedia presentation. I want it to feel informal. There will be mistakes. There will be glitches, but let's roll with that. So first, because and show. We'll go here and a little bit of multimedia here.
Damn right she does.
Right. So thank you for bearing with me there. And let's see. From beginning. All right. So the whole idea with that video and doing this work in part is really to try to leverage what I've learned, right? To leverage a life's experiences. And when one thinks about who it is that we are as academics, again, those questions of how and why should come to fore. Really, those are existential questions of our lives that daily we are addressing. And certainly we're doing that more after coming out of a pandemic. And many of us would argue that these existential questions have been at play through multiple crises. But here at a university where it's sort of a cauldron of thought, allegedly, where free expression should be welcomed, I want to take some time this morning to talk about how, as Lily sort of outlined my history, how I came to this choice. And so I have to first think about how I came to this place, in part on a number of questions that that really need to be answered. Because the quote that I would use is that people would say, you know, you really shouldn't stay here. You need to leave and come back later. You need to leave and come back later. And so I say almost everyone in the business, because in academia, this is what we hear, right? You know, if you've been here, go somewhere else. If you're at home, leave home. And I mean, when we began to talk about issues of dispersal, right, for other beings, and we understand the importance of dispersal for genetic integrity, we begin to understand the importance of dispersal for various reasons. For me, as a person facing some of these questions on the occasion of my choice to come here to Clemson, where I was told, by the way, that coming to this part of South Carolina, I would be immediately lynched, right? On the occasion of my choice to stay at Clemson past my BS for my MS, why stay here? Drew, you need to find someplace else to be. On the occasion of my choice to stay past my MS, to work at TIWET. For those of you who don't know, that's the Institute of Wildlife and Environmental Toxicology. That is now the Emeritus College, or at least beside it. Now, take that for what you will. They need to do a little bit better by those who have served, right? But that message was the same. And then after deciding to stay here for my doctorate again, leave, go someplace else. Now, mind you, there are these mitigating factors that most people didn't know about. They didn't know about my marriage to Janice. They didn't know about the children that we were having. They didn't even consider her career, and that I would have to consider somebody else in my life before I picked up and went somewhere else. So this whole idea of people telling me to leave, then come back on the occasion of, has been sort of central to my experience. And that experience, really, and those people telling me to do that, has been loaded with privilege. Loaded with privilege. Was on a call a couple of years ago now, and remembering with Southeastern Partners in Amphibian and Reptile Conservation, was on this panel where we were talking about inclusion and diversity and what it means in this field. And again, we came up on this question, and people asking about graduate school and postdocs and so on and so forth. But it just so happened that this was a heterogeneous grouping of people. And folks were saying, you know what, I'm a single mother. I can't just pick up and go. You know what, I don't have the money to move across country at someone else's whim to be what you want me to be. And suddenly, right, people begin to think on the occasion of being who it is that you are, right? That's an existential think, who you are. That defines it. So in thinking about that, that caused me as a member of this panel to think, wow, right? You know, as people are telling me time after time after time that my career is doomed because I have chosen this place, that even as people within this place told me to leave or turn me down for adjunct status in my own university, I found value here, but I also had to answer an existential question, not just of myself, but to others whom I am obliged, family, friends, and thinking in the ways that would leverage what I had learned or have learned or am learning into something greater. So yeah, there's a lot of investment here. A lot of investment here. The hands you see here are my family. My wife, Janice, me, our two children, not my son-in-law yet, not yet. We didn't know that he was in the world. He is now, and he now also has a Clemson degree in addition to his Claflin degree, a degree in electrical engineering. Close to 90 years invested in this university as a family. Close to 90 years. Now, I dare to find that amongst any of the alumni families here at Clemson, but we've obviously found some value in this place. And those of you who have tried to enroll your children here who work here know that the state of South Carolina gives you no breaks to be here. And actually, I tried to get the kids to go to other places. We really didn't force them, but they both ended up finding a way to be here. And both are now actually working here. So again, you know, it rings in my ears from time to time on the occasion of whatever was going on in my life for someone to tell me to leave, to fly away, to disperse, to leave this place, not understanding what might hold me here or hold value for me here. Now, I told a past chair this, that I was going to quote them. But this was key for me. This was key because I had been away on a talk, as a matter of fact, with the Audubon Society at the Manhattan Club, trying to help them secure another round of grant funding from Toyota. It was for the Together Green program. And I went up there and literally fell flat on my face. I was getting up on stage and I went to sort of hop up athletically past any sort of athletic. And somehow this foot caught that leg and I fell flat in front of the international CEO of Toyota. You know, the EPA chief. I was sitting at a table in between a Rockefeller and a Roosevelt. I got up and I think I delivered the talk of my life because I had nothing else to lose. But I came back, right? I came back and, you know, and I didn't go up there for this, but, you know, Audubon started saying, you know, we want to talk to you. We want to talk to you because this was, I helped secure at this point, about $14 million past the $20 million they already had. So they said, you know, you helped us do this. We want to talk to you about doing more. And I went into my chair's office and we were talking. And I'm going to go ahead and reveal it. And she said, take that word. And she said, Pat said to me, no, this is good because Pat said, Drew, everyone knows you're not going to it.
Physically.
Yeah. It was sort of like one of these sort of bumps, right? It's a precordial bump that caused my heart to beat different. Because at that point in my head, I started hearing again sort of this whole idea maybe of being stuck, like a leashed shrew on calorie pair. But being stuck in a place, right? And sort of this internal questioning of why I was here, and what my purpose was here. And this caused sort of a doubling down and thinking. Now, mind you, this same chair is the chair Pat, who, when I went to her and I said, you know, there's this writing workshop that I'd like to go to at a little place called Sterling College in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, who didn't hesitate and found a way to help me get it. So these seminal moments, right? These seminal moments that we have that cause us to think existentially about the hows and whys of our lives, and sometimes about being stuck in a place. Not blaming my favorite, I have to get my loggerhead shrike in here. But perhaps of being trapped somehow. All right, and so this is something that I want us to think about in whatever our roles are at university. Whatever our roles are at university, where it is that we are, because you heard my history, and a big part of my history is this idea of living up to others' expectations, stuck on convention, caught in expectations, web mired in others' wants. This happens to be, I think, a 575 hybrid. But in this case, I think about the years spent in engineering, right? I think about this whole idea of people saying Black kids don't study birds. You know, you can be a physician, you can be a veterinarian, you like animals, don't you? But you should be an engineer. That's who you should be. You can study birds on the side. That was sort of constant. Even here in engineering, as I did well enough to get to my junior year, being stuck in others' expectations, begging my scholarship sponsor, who had by that time DuPont had broadened the scope of the scholarship, but they still denied me and told me who it was that I had to be. And so that was life-threatening, literally. I had some very dark thoughts. So this whole idea of asking these questions as people, as human beings, but then asking them of ourselves as professionals too, as part of our lives, I think is critical. So I spend a lot of time in, this is my mobile office. And I do spend a lot of time in my mobile office on university property, in case anybody's counting. So this is out at Simpson Station. Everybody know where Simpson Station is? Wow.
No.
Wow. This is the beef farm out there, right? Part of our land grant system. This day, I think, well, I know I was looking at the strike because that's been an obsession, but I spend a lot of time thinking about these questions, still thinking about these questions of why here, right? And in this particular case, thinking about this 40-acre field, that's not inconsequential, right? This 40-acre field being taken over by hot fescue, with cattle still grazing in it, thinking about how to make it better. Not restoration necessarily, but a transformation, perhaps. The native warm season grass is something that maybe heirloom cattle could graze on, that bobolinks and meadowlarks and dickcissels and grasshopper sparrows also like. Meanwhile, me telling the story of being a Black professor at a land grant institution. A land grant institution is built on the blood of indigenous people. A land grant institution that was founded by somebody who I'm probably related to, thinking about 40 acres and how I'm going to get a mule out there. So this all ties together for me on the occasion of why I stay, on the occasion of why I'm here. And so these thoughts, this thinking, led to this whole idea. And I, you know, if you followed me, you kind of understand I love lists. I don't list birds anymore, not really. Not in the ways that we typically do, but I love these whole ideas of litany. Lane, I like these ideas of litany because in part, you know, that suffering, being stuck in a church pew for all those years and listening to people list the do's and don'ts of life, I thought it was appropriate today to try to give you some concrete, some tangible ideas about sort of the how and why of what this is. And hopefully it's something that you can take with you that helps you along. All right. First of all, see your career as an n-dimensional hypervolume. How many people know what an n-dimensional hypervolume is? In other words, expand, right? Don't just think of one role of your life in one place. Expand. That's a Hutchinsonian kind of thing. So for ecologists, it really just refers to, don't just think of your life on two axes, X and Y. Think of your life on multiple axes. Right? Think of your life in a cloud. Think of those data points arrayed in all of these dimensions, and that is who you are. You'll discover that. You'll discover that. All right. So you work creatively, expand creatively to fill necessary and desirable niches. 2, don't silo yourself into extinction. Now, I say this because here at university, now I've counted and I've been through something like 5, 6 restructures, but really only 2 because they begin to repeat themselves. I remember being, you probably, remember being in this room one day when a provost told us, we need a green team to go out and say, wait a minute, we got extension. That's who we were, right? Who we are. So in thinking about who it is that we are, faculty have been asking, if you go down a hall now, what is it? It's closed doors. Well, that's because we live in a world where we have to have closed doors. But I can remember going down halls and I can remember faculty sort of flowing in and out of offices, and I remember that exchange. I remember going off campus for just a little bit to have a holiday celebration. Hardly any of that happens now. We're siloed. And doing one thing can pay off gloriously until it doesn't. By the way, this building that you're sitting in was really built for one person. Those of you who've been here long enough know. When the last brick was sent into this building, that person left for a $10 million startup somewhere else. Seriously, that's not a just so. Michael, and I'm telling the truth. You're telling the truth. One person. So the university had that one person in mind and built this. So expand, be outside. And I say here, and this looked better, become a Grants finch. All right. Some of you are familiar with the Grants who've studied the Galapagos finches. And when we think of evolution, people tend to think of evolution along these lines of millions of years, right? Of millennia. No. What you want to think about is you want to think about this sort of rapid adaptation and evolution. It's necessary knowledge of what the university is. So understanding why a building is where a building is, or why you don't even have a new building, or why the technology isn't in your building, it should be in your building, helps you to expand beyond status quo. Helps you, because when we think about it, evolution isn't just a status quo thing, is it? It's not a status quo thing. So it's this projection. It's this genetic projection in some ways. Certainly it's governed by status quo, but we're looking for differential survival and reproduction behind that. Play to your strengths, but develop the capacity to excel at other things. So I'm an ornithologist, but my first 12 graduate students, there were herpetologists, there was a lepidopterist, there was ornithologists. There were all these different things, and working with all of these different kinds of people that helped me to be better at unsiloing. All right, these are better. 4, avoid the thundering herd unless you're from Marshall, then you want to cheer for them. Okay. Avoid the thundering herd. This is saying that you have to think about individuality. Now, universities, not just Clemson, now we're in what's called the most truthful, what I would say, state of at least admitting who you are. We're in a revenue generating model, so y'all ought to know what that means. They finally called it what it is, revenue generating model. So here we are. But how do you survive? And I'll tell you, to bring a graph and say, oh, I've got, because I played, my career is built based mainly on small ball. take a $50,000 grant or $80,000 or $100,000 and leverage that not into a graduate student, but into 3. Treat them as well as we can do with that amount, but to play small, you bring $50,000 to your people now, they don't want it. That's not how we operate. So, but I would tell you to find a way, the way that I found around that, here's the secret. Don't turn that money down. Let somebody else be the PI. Come in and consult on that. You negotiate on your terms, your authorship on that money that then somebody else outside probably will do a better job of control. How many people do that? Good. More of you ought to, because I still ain't at that point where I can turn down $50,000. That's a lot of money. But just because your sponsored programs does not want to handle it does not mean that you let that go. Does that make sense? There are lots of people out there who can manage your money outside of this university. And I'm sure there's somewhere now saying, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But
you don't have to pay the directs either.
No, that's the thing, right? And so this keys back into adaptation. If somebody is telling me that I have to operate in a certain way, I've got to find my way to operate. Okay. So that's key for graduate students. That's key, especially for new faculty. Because if you're just waiting on that one big hit from the NSF grant that there's a 0.03% chance of you getting, and you have waged your tenure track life on that. Okay. So everyone isn't always right. Always ask who the they are. And whoever it is that said they said. Now, Janice and I, my wife and I talk about, we always ask, do you ever ask that? When you're in a meeting and somebody says, well, what they said is, whoa. I need to know who they is. Are they evaluating me? Are they controlling the purse strings? Are they on the grant? All right, all of those questions are necessary, and I cannot tell you how many faculty meetings I've been in where people do not ask who they are. Ask who they are. Always clarify. 5, never lose your morbid curiosity. You got into this work. Everyone, how many people got into this work thinking that you were going to get rich? All right, cool. Nobody did. But how many people got into this because it was enriching? Right? So I call this my tadpoles common postulate, because how many people, if you're ever with someone and they can walk past a puddle with tadpoles in it, divest yourself. That, by the way, is one of the university mantras, divest to index.
Oh, yeah.
Divest to index, not so that serious. So in thinking about this, this really comes into a sort of one of these later rules, in that if you keep that curiosity, I mean, that's the purest part of what we do. Think about it. That's the purest part of what we do. This amazement and wonder and awe at something that you see, the way that it makes you feel. That is why we are here at university, because we have the opportunity to do that. And so making sure every once in a while you sort of check back, Patty and I were talking beforehand, just a little bit, this opportunity to live a dream, right? To live a dream where what comes out of here means something. So sometimes amidst all the, I think it's almost 20 platforms we got to know as faculty now, at least. With all you're going through as graduate students, with those mind-numbing things, sometimes you got to step back and you got to say, why am I doing this? Go back to the tadpoles that caused you to pause. Go back to the first bird song that maybe you recognized or that you didn't. You said, I need to know more. Go back to that. Drop back to that common denominator. And that will give you more energy than you can imagine to get on to that next thing, maybe that next day, maybe through that meeting that didn't go so well. 6, be authorial in following your passions. That is, burrow into your work. get down and deep and dirty into it. You know, that again is what this life affords us. It affords us, it should afford us the opportunity to get down into it, to ask these deep and probing, often simple questions that no one else maybe has asked. But I would also caution you, you always have an escape hatch. You always dig further than you think you need. You know, you have antechambers, you have all this stuff, and then you have a way, right? You have a way to get out of that tunnel. That's just an important thing in there. I mean, we can be very specific, you know, in conversation about this, but as faculty, you know, we think about this place where we cultivate ideas, right? But in some ways, the university also owns your ideas, right? So, you know, so in students ask, well, why aren't your lectures online? Why do well? What if I leave? What if I want to pick up and take what I have somewhere else? Now, I didn't think that as young faculty because my idea about the university was very ideal. But now, this is a revenue generating place. And so you have to think about your ideas. You have to think about what you have here that ultimately, guess what? You're going to pick up and go. So if someone tells you as a postdoc or an advanced graduate student, they say, develop this course for me, negotiate that. Because when you're going to your next job at the other university and you want to pick up and take that with you, guess what? Hold on a minute. That's connected to Clemson.edu. Know that? That's it. A little startling, right? But that's the truth. And people run into this. You get around and you begin to understand, all right, how universities work, how entities work, and ideas mean money. They used to be free, but really have they ever? All right, so we can begin to talk about appropriation. We can begin to talk about all of those things. So that's what I mean by escape hatch. Sure, I'm going to provide the skeleton, but you ain't going to get all the guts, all the muscle, all the blood, all the nerves. That does not come for free. That's just the wise professional decision. And you negotiate those things as graduate students and as faculty. It's important. You also learn what copyright and trademark is. Yes. Pay attention to conflict of interest and those kinds of things. Here, stay around university long enough and you understand. You begin to understand those things. Those are some of the escape hatches that we talk about. All right. 7, mentoring is a critical thing, right? And I talk about, you know, sitting with Pat and we may not have always agreed, right? But really part of what, and I think I've been through, Greg, I think you were maybe my 6th department chair, I think. You know, every department chair. I look at different points in my life, right? And being supported and having chairs who support who it is that I am is important. But one of the things I can tell you my first, and I've written about this, my first week after being hired here, and people had said, why don't you go somewhere else? To have 4 horsemen, 4 faculty show up at my door as I was working late one night and tell me why my affirmative action hire had me doing. 4 showed up at my door. And then in subsequent years, one would stop me in the hall. A couple of years, you know, as you're going through evaluation, and he'd say, you know, it's just going to be so hard. It's going to be so hard. So
I love the way you call them the 4 horsemen, though. Isn't that like in Revelation?
Oh, it's like the end of my work.
The horsemen of Revelation.
There was death, there was pestilence. You know, and there was probation. So, but you know what those people taught me to be is how not to be. And none of those people are here in this room. So people can help you understand who to be, but they can also help you understand who not to be. That's almost as critical because you're like, wait a minute, am I acting like dude? Let me step back for a minute. All right, so you see here I've listed people who are gone on from us, like Henry David Thoreau. Let me tell you, Thoreau's a hero for me because as a conservationist, as an environmentalist, Thoreau did not shy away from social issues. As Walden was coming out, Thoreau was pissed off about the Fugitive Slave Act. That's real, right? So that's why Thoreau is up there. Rachel Carson, well, she was being blacklisted because people didn't exactly think she fit into the places that she should have fit into. George Washington Carver. How many people know that George Washington Carver delivered a lecture here at Clemson University in 1922 as Strom Thurmond was a senior? And probably had just impregnated Bessie. Black woman. George Washington, you didn't know that George Washington Carver lectured here at Clemson? Oh, Clemson has not let you know that? Wow. How do we know? A woman whose husband was in the Corps of Cadets at the time, George Washington Carver, during this tour of these southern schools at universities where he could not stay on campus or anywhere close, he probably stayed in Seneca. George Washington Carver began a correspondence with this woman's husband, and they continued this correspondence for many years. Who was here? A black man who they said, well, yeah, come here and talk to us about saving the soil, about plowing on the contour, about planting leguminous crops. They had nitrogen in the soil. He was telling them all that, but he was not. His science, his brain was good enough to lead. His idea is good enough to lead, but his body not worthy enough to stay. So you see what I'm talking about when I say, don't give it all away. Make sure that you understand, that others understand your value as well as you understand your value. Now, you can undervalue yourself. You can say, well, you know what? I'm just a lecturer. You can say, I'm just a grad student in my first year. Don't do that. So that's something that I have to practice, right? Even now, that I have to practice. So thinking about your mentors, thinking about those people who've gone through hell, high water, and back to be who it is that they are or were is important. And then seek out those people who will help you. Seek out those people who will give you just a minute of time to help you along. Hey, be a little cowbird-esque. Now, what do I mean by this? You know what? I've really come to admire cowbirds after so many years of being brainwashed and people telling me that they're only here because humans have disrupted the landscape, blah, 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 blah. Evolutionarily speaking, you know, you got to take the chance. You got to marvel at an organism that can put its eggs into another's nest, have them raised, and them not lose their identity. Right? Because after that, they crash up. They're like, hey, we're cowbirds. You know? We're not yellow warblers. We're not. Now, somebody's going to say, Lanham said, you know, that Kirtland's warblers should raise cowbirds. That's not what I said. But what I am saying is, this is related to ideas. This is related to collaboration. And so once you find those people who you can work with, you begin to cross-foster ideas. You let them raise ideas in a different way, right? And you begin to see your work in a different light. This is also part of de-siloing, because if you look at how many people have looked at a data set for days, weeks, months, and you just can't see it. You just can't see it. And then you give it to somebody else and they're like, oh, that's the egg in another nest. That's the egg in another nest. So finding that person with whom you can exchange these ideas and collaborate is critical in what we do. So this goes back to de-siloing it, to not just thinking of yourself as this entity that the university might have you be in generating revenue, But to think, and not just at this university, I'm so amazed when people tell me, oh my God, why are you traveling? Why are you at that university or this? I thought that's what we were supposed to do. I didn't think it was all just built to be here. So find those people. When you go to meetings, I'm going to tell you now, for those of you early on in your career, for those of you thinking about doing this, please develop relationships with people outside of the data, right? To have those people who at some point in time professionally will have your back. Will have your back. Not just in some sort of material exchange, but in a way that's going to have them know your humanity. And that maybe they can go to bat for you, or maybe just listen to you while you itch and moan about the next restructure, right? So Cowbird-esque, I call this my karma is a glitch hypothesis. And it's going to come back to you. And these little glitches, and you'll say, wait a minute, how did that happen? And you're like, wait a minute, I remember meeting this person at this meeting and we had this discussion. And this has turned into this wonderfully glorious relationship. I can tell you, Katie Greenberg and I have been working together. Some of you know Katie up at Bent Creek. Wonderful scientist with the Forest Service. And we were working on a fruit study, a frugivorary study, really, to look at natural disturbance and how it impacts bird communities in the Southern Appalachians. I was working on that stuff when I was an assistant professor. Our publication will finally hit this year. This year, Mariah Whitehead, who many of you know, is a partner in this. So this is the long game. This is the long game. I want you to think about that long game. 9, remember your nest. That is your hatchling and nestling to fledging years. This is going back a little bit to that tadpole kind of philosophy. But as we're standing in front of students, let's remember being there. So let's just not drop the extreme exam on them the Friday before the biggest game of the year and pretend, right? Let's not come into class after another massacre and act like what we have to teach is more important than what's going on in the world. Your students will appreciate you stepping back and being human. They will appreciate, you know, it's not all about what they're going to say on your current evaluation. I mean, we know how invalid so much of that can be, but project 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and who do see these people as future peers? Now, I know that's hard with some, right? But at the very least, see them as future peers and being Homo sapiens sapiens. And how do you want people remembering you as faculty all the years hence? Don't haze. You know, Jan and I get to talk a lot about our exchanges with students. You know, we're at a time when people can be easily pushed over the edge. You can push, or you can reach out a hand and grab and pull. Okay. So thinking about that and reestablishing this point of empathy has been what has been critical for me in my career. 10, embrace adaptive change for good, but hold fast to your own unique identity and never give in to fit others' moods. And an anole is a chameleon, right? Surface color may change, but interior remains the same. Don't get stuck by the butcher birds. Who are the butcher birds? Well, the butcher birds are those who are going to tell you, well, this is who I need you to be, stuck in this place. This is how I need you to be, stuck in this place. Impaled by process, right? And I know we've got all kinds of forms to fill out before we think. But then, you know, this rule 11 to me is most important, to constantly consult your field guide. Not field, but your field guide. that is to not forget your humanity as an academic. I mean, how are we being portrayed in the outside world now? Really? That a board of trustees member would say that wokeness is more deadly than any pandemic could ever be? Really? Not mentioning any names, you can look it up. Lifetime appointment to say that. You got a university hitch to that. So yeah, my left arm is a little longer than my right, but that's okay. Because you know what? I really got tired of my students thinking that I was some robot, some I professor up in front of them who did not have ideas that molded my thought. So it is important that our students, that our peers see us. It always amazed me, even in my own department, you know, as people retired, then you learn that they are like, I don't know, you know, master musicians and artisans. You're like, huh? You do that? And then somebody's talking about their collection after they're dead, sort of this posthumous sort of identity that we have. But I think we're in a world where we can ill afford to not feel. We're in a world where we can ill afford to sort of hide ourselves under our data, then go home and be somebody else. You know, the loggerhead shrike is here as a bird that I really love and envy in some ways, and empathize with, because it's a code switching bird. It's a code switcher. I write a lot about loggerhead shrikes because on the one hand they're raptorial, but because they don't have strong enough feet to carry prey, they have to impale it. And sometimes we think for some pretty ingenious reasons, right? To let it detoxify in the case of a toad, perhaps. But here is a bird that's also a passerine, a songbird. Code switch. How many of you have to code switch? How many of you, who you are at university, then at 4:30, you're like, now I can be this other person, this other human being. I crossed the border to Esso or to Nix, and now I can really be me. Well, that's not healthy. I can tell you from 3.5 stints, right? That code switching leads to other things. It leads to sort of this duplicity of being that then has one person asking existential questions of the other. This job is already hard enough without having to question who it is that we are, right? So, you know, I try to make that plain to people that I talk to after being faculty who sort of did have to hide for many years, to hide behind the professoriate, to hide behind my academic veil. Not always cool. So I like to call this, this is either Sisyphus. Who knows who Sisyphus was? All right, okay, Greek mythology. Sisyphus was tasked with rolling a stone up a hill. Sisyphus, or dung beetle, or an academic. The work never seems done, right? It always seems like some insurmountable hill. Now, you know, if you look up a little bit, you'll say, oh my God, look at those indentations on the stone. How much does the stone weigh? How much work am I having to put into keeping this stone in place, or what's going to happen if I let it go and it rolls back down the hill, right? So this is what much of our work feels like. But I prefer to take my time in other offices and other places. My friend John Lane will recognize this as the skeleton beach, the boneyard beach on Botany Bay. How many people have ever been there? Okay, right? Edisto Island, a lot of history, a lot of nature there, a lot of stuff to be taught, a lot of stuff to be learned. But this is a classroom for me, but it's also a counseling couch, and it's free. I've already paid for it with tax dollars. So it's a place to go to unwind and to think about things existentially, or maybe nothing at all, which is an existential exercise in itself. And I tell people I do travel away. I get to go to faraway places. I get to look out over Denali. I get to look out over a world. And guess what I'm doing the whole time that I'm doing all of this? This is data gathering. This is data gathering. How many times have you gone away to someplace else, someplace nearby, maybe far away, quiet, and again, the data clicks, the words come. You figure out how to deal with a troublesome whatever or whomever in that space, but you have to give yourself both that space and that grace to be in those places, right? To not run yourself in the ground, to not run yourself round and round, raggedly torn in some way that then you are less the next day than you were the day before, because you refuse to be yourself, to give yourself what you need. I will tell you that Tom Waldrop, a former faculty here in the Forest Service Experiment Station, was on my dissertation committee. And I remember I went to one committee member had this idea. I remember taking my data set in, and he said, "You're going to need at least 3 more seasons of this." And at that point in time in my dissertation work, I was again at sort of this bad place, right? Because I'd already had to sort of abandon the first project because there were racists 5 miles from where I was going to do this work. And they were shooting targets of Black people and all of this stuff. And for a committee member, for someone to tell you well and laugh and say, "Well, we're not going to give you your degree posthumously," that was not funny to me. And then for a committee member to tell me, "Well, you're going to need to spend at least 3 more years." And I remember going to Tom's office, and Tom opened his door. Man, was such a productive. He ran the Southeastern Fire Study Group, did all of this amazing work. Pat knows him, Greg knows him, many of you know him. And he was the leader of the unit. Tom pushed back from his desk and he said, "Sit down." And I began to talk to him. He said, "Man," he said, "Go home today." He said, "Go home." I was like, he said, "Drew, go home." That was both life affirming and maybe life saving. Because I was on an edge. Tom didn't push. He grabbed my hand and he pulled. So when you think about those instances where we have the opportunity to pull instead of push, it can take us to different places. So I gather data now, I write it in poetry books, right, in haiku. Students in my classes, well, if you're in my ornithology class, you're going to write haiku. I want you to reduce a bird identity, habitat, maybe some conservation issue into 17 syllables. It's challenging. Spend a lot of work in museums because I think it's important for us to understand the past and to understand how the past is presented. And sometimes birds like this Carolina parakeet somehow talk back to me. And birds like this Carolina parakeet will talk back to me about John James Audubon re-enslaving someone in a swamp when he was bird watching, then lead me to write articles about it that then lots of people maybe read. But then it's a way to leverage what I have learned, but also who it is that I am. I get on roads like this, John Lane. This is the road into Botany Bay. I get on roads like this that look straight, but any light that's at the end of that tunnel, hopefully is some light of illumination, some light of enrichment that I can then follow. I don't identify birds as much as I used to as identify with birds. This happens to be a black-throated green warbler that shows up right in the backyard in autumn. But to have the chance to think about that bird's journey, to think about how that bird ends up in my space, to have a chance to think about how birds have enriched my life from being the little boy who wanted to fly to an ornithologist to someone who gets to write about them in an evocative way, to then be able to expand my universe outside of Clemson, to have opportunities at Wofford, to have opportunities at Warren Wilson, to have opportunities at Idaho, that all of these places across the country has been fulfilling in important ways. And sometimes other people notice. So that's it, right? 11 rules. Now, those 11 rules, I must say, here's the caveat. They will not guarantee excellence on your next evaluation, whatever we're going to call it. They will not guarantee flawless academic careers, but I think it will cause you to pause again with sort of this internal data gathering that's so important for us to remember why it is that we're here in the first place. Why it is that we're here in the first place. So I'm always so appreciative when I see peers here who've been here almost as long as I have, who can remember the restructures, friends who show up new and older, and people who I don't know. So, you know, I hope, you know, that as I'm in 115 Lahotsky down there in that corner, sort of, I love it because it's wormy chestnut and different kinds of bugs are in there, not moldy bugs. But other sorts of things. You know, when you get a chance, if you see me, just let's just say hi. But I hope that there's something here that you can take with you that helps you understand that you can be successful from this place or wherever it is that you choose to be on the occasion of. I always say what I want people to do is to get out of their heads, not leave your brain behind on the hike to your heart. That's how I govern my success now. Getting out of this, taking this that's inside to this, and then it comes out in different ways. So thank you so much, Lily, for what you've done and fighting together. Thank you, Thea, for the time. Thank you, people out there on Zoom. All two of you. And again, thank you so much. If there's time for questions, or I'd love to take some. Questions? Okay.
Your transition from student to staff. How do we do it?
How do you do it?
How do I say Drew instead of Dr. Lanham?
We have to call this what it is. University is a caste system. What it is. Right? And so we define by rank, you know, degree, that sort of thing. One of the, again, I'll go back to Tom Walker and to Dave Van Leer, who many of you may. I can remember when I was getting hired and was going to be here, and I was still calling everybody Dr. So-and-so. Dave Van Leer pulled me aside and he said, one of us now, right? Don't do that. You're sort of putting yourself in a place. Tom will still get mad at you if you say Dr. Walter Bass Janice, right? And so that's part of it. Now, you want to give respect for what people have earned and what they have worked for. But the person who upheld me ultimately and being called Dr. So-and-so was Kobe, our son, who's now 29, or 28. But Kobe, at some point, I picked him up from school, and he's riding there in the front seat. I think he's maybe in second grade. He's sitting there, and he said, "Daddy, so-and-so just called you Dr. So-and-so." He said, "Are you really a doctor?" And I looked at him, I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Are you a real doctor?" And I explained to him what I did. And then he sort of like, "Oh, and so you're not a priest." And so I was like, So I say that to say, get a hold of yourself, right? Now, if you really got the degree so people could go around chanting that to you, there are places, but they will also make you wear your academic regalia every day. So part of that, Patty, is to say that there has to be a self-confidence, right? And I think what bears mentioning is that the universities have not done a good job of cultivating community. You know, we're really no longer as communal as we used to be. And so I think part of my transition was having people who would say, you know what, you can do this, and you can do this. But me also understanding that I earned my way. You know, those four horsemen. I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, I hope all of these people are gone by the time my first review comes up. You know, in 5 years. And lo and behold, one of those people was chair of the promotion and tenure committee. Extraordinarily complimentary. It was, and I remember him approaching me in the hall in the way that he did. And he complimented me. I was like, wow, is that an apology? We don't want to talk about it. And so I went back. I took it because it ultimately was all on me. Ultimately, it was on me to do this stuff, but I was also building escape hatches. I was also also developing relationships at other universities and other things that I could do. And I had a safety, right, that I thought of career-wise. I had a safety. So that's it. That's important in the context of that transition, but always remembering where it is that we are. You know, expectance doesn't just come from the prefix. Right. That makes sense?
Yeah.
But I love questions. Yes.
So many early career folks do that. I mean, thinking about these 11 principles, while also at the same time living in metrics.
Yes,
Right? Everything's
yes.
like our currency.
I did try to get a fish in there, but I'm sorry.
Just anything you can speak to in terms of balancing these things out in your mind, how to come back and revisit these things.
Yeah, it's very important. You know, the metrics, you know, and one real world metric, you know, I'll tell you, my wife is on back, she said it. And one of the things, I hope I'm not out of house here, but one of the things that is always worried me is that as I began to cross over and create, there was no way to count, for example, a book, you know, a creative nonfiction. You're like, where do I put this? And there was nowhere to put it. You're like, wait, I worked all this time on this book. How do I count it? People are working to how to measure those things. But what I found back in the old days of FAST, that I would sit with new faculty and they'd have their FAST down, they would have maybe they'd have their class listed, right? And they taught this. But then they would not have cross-evaluated themselves into pedagogical innovation. I'm like, wait a minute, you did this in your class? Why is it not here? Oh, that'd be double dipping. Really? Here's this class list that you taught. Did you do anything different? So you got to think outside of your own boxes. Right? Think outside of your own, think about those collaborations. So again, it's leveraging what you do into the multiple things that they are. Almost nothing is singularly listed. I mean, and by that I mean it doesn't just stand by itself. So who are the collaborators, right? What are the things? So let's say you have a paper with 4 authors, and those 4 authors that you're working with, you're also talking about other ideas. Maybe you're already on a grant with them, but those are ways to really begin to get at this whole idea of leverage. So what new faculty tend to do is they're so stressed is they see this one thing, this one class, and they haven't gone in and say, well, how were you different? Well, maybe you instituted something called micro lectures, right? Guess what that just was? that was, you know, at the end of it, there was a video to show. We don't have the time for that. But to be able to bring in new techniques, what are you doing that's new? Now, I'm going to tell you something else that you also don't know. You own your evaluations. Okay? You own those evaluations. So there are opportunities for you to be evaluated in different ways by other than by someone who hasn't passed the grad because they didn't show up for half the semester. How many of you have ever called a peer in to evaluate your teaching?
You're here.
Wow. Really? You own your evaluations. Office of Instructional
Teaching effective.
of Teaching Effectiveness. How many of you ever called on them, the professionals on campus, to come to you and say, and sit in your class and professionally evaluate your class? How many of you have ever done that? There you go. That's a tool.
And it's part of the culture you're talking about. It goes back to that mentoring. If we don't have somebody like, I had a colleague actually give me their evaluation and show me how they wrote it. Like somebody has to show you that. They can't just give it to you and expect you to know like what the recipe of success is. Like, and so the fact that you're willing to share that, so having a culture of mentoring and mentorship within that level in the college, it doesn't exist in my department. I don't know about yours.
Well, again, those are out there, but you're dependent on really. Now, again, I remember a couple of the evaluations I wrote for faculty when I was in grad, especially my biochemistry. Would have helped if I'd shown up for biochemistry. But I made it her fault. So that's important that you have sort of this way, right? For people that, and it's an evaluation that you feel confident in, but that also helps. And guess what? It's not just that they rate you, but then you get to go back and say, it's iterative. That guess what I'm doing to improve my class, because somebody's going to ask. So again, that's sort of one of these important steps, you know, that you begin to take as faculty, to not just depend on what people have told you, what they said you had to do. And I'll tell you something that we did in our department, and Pat, I think you started this. How many people have written their, well, everybody that just does it now, your own narrative, your Form 3. Greg, did you? How many people have written, so it's kind of like writing, how many people have ever written your own obituary? Oh, do that. Do that. That's a writing prompt. I want to see that. No later. No, to write, really? Yeah, sometimes the Form 3 can turn into
for an award, like a fellow in the society or a professional award or any of those things, or even a job about, you know, what you're saying is right. You better write the draft and then share it with somebody so they have the ability to do it for you. Even how many kids have asked me to do a job, you know, recommendation?
Oh.
Write me the
Yeah, write me the letter. Have those students. Oh, yeah. Right, let me see what you think of yourself.
Boy, that can really turn it on.
Oh, yeah. How many of you are getting those requests now at the last minute? And they say, and 2 days later, they're like, get that to me now. Right? So let me see how urgent you are. Senior. And so again, write your own narrative. Even if your department chairs and others aren't asking, write your own narrative. Because otherwise you can think about this. Now this is, I mean, from a writer standpoint, John, you're giving your narrative away.
You don't do
If you don't do it. And Don't just willy-nilly check off that you accept something if you don't agree with it. Don't, and it doesn't have to be contentious. But if someone has written a story of you that's untrue, inaccurate, let's say, then we agree to disagree. I think that's kind of what university is about. That's what peer review is about. So again, that's ownership, and it takes a while to learn that. But I'm shocked that so many people depend upon student evaluations for others to say how you are.
Because, and can I just build on that? Because from an administrative point of view, if you have 50% of your time teaching, and I have nothing, because a lot of times we don't trust evaluations as administrators. You better be telling me what you did 50% of your time, or all you got is a good. Right?
Yeah.
Because if nothing, you proved nothing. So all I can give you is a good. I can't give you above anything. But I can look at your research because I can read your papers and all that kind of stuff. But it's 50% of your time. Tell me what you did.
And if you've got,
you didn't invite me to class.
and that's invite colleagues to class. And if you got a dossier going forward for external review, got a pile of student evaluations. Oh, guess what? That's going to show. So to have the profession, and how many graduate students do I have here? How many of you are applying for jobs? Going to be applying. How many of you will be applying for jobs? How many of you have in that packet your effectiveness as an instructor? What are you depending? Think about that. And the Office of Teaching Effectiveness is giving. I mean, it's free. And they're one of the most underused offices on campus. People don't access them. Linda Nielsen, who used to be here, Linda did this wonderful, wonderful work, and there are wonderful people there now. But I know Janice has used her, I use them, but to have people tell you from a pedagogical standpoint where you stand, what they see, they'll break your date. Look, if you give them your student evaluations, they'll tell you why they are skewed the way they are skewed. So that's critical information for faculty who are sort of moving through the ranks to understand from a research perspective. It sort of bears the same kind of fruit that you develop these relationships with people outside of the university, of this university, that you have these relationships in other places, that you have several plates spinning. Right? Not all your eggs in one basket, but that now you have several plates spinning because there are others that help. There are other, here's Katie out there working. There's Sarah at the University of Georgia. There are folks at Virginia Tech I'm working with. There are, people at Alabama State. So you've got these things going on, all these pots sort of cooking on the stove, and some produce now, some produce later. But relationships, and I'm talking here to those folks sort of early mid-career, building relationships in this business is critical, even though it's maybe harder in some ways to do now than it used to be. But don't forego the small ball. Don't forego that that seemingly small moment that might not be small at Tuskegee. Might not be small at Tuskegee, but then you have an opportunity in that work with Tuskegee or South Carolina State, maybe to do really good science. And I'm putting that science on my evaluation as a grant or paper or what else. But guess what I'm also doing? This is also cross-cultural. This is also, what is it called? Global what now? Global challenges. So how am I meeting global challenges as faculty? Let me tell you one of the things administrators love. They love their own words back. Oh, look, if you're going to tell me this, if you're going to tell me to divest and invest, I'm going to tell you how I divested to invest. That's a trick. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely.
What you've done, Socrates, is you said, this proved, oh, so you're telling me that what you said isn't worth what I did. Ooh. Then you have a way, seriously, then as you sit there, you say, yeah, but you said this, and this is what I did. How was this not bad? I'll catch. So you want to play a game of catch. You don't know, you're not throwing at anybody's head, you're not trying to throw high. But what you're trying to do is establish dialogue and discourse. And that's what university should be about. That's what our students should see. That's what we should try to do. So I'm grateful for the time, for the opportunity to do this. And I hope that there's something that you can take with you. So thank you guys for coming. Yes.
Robert, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is here on campus today from 2 until 5 in the Watt Center. The official agenda went out on the faculty list there a few days ago. You'll have it in your email, but I also have a flyer if you want to take a picture.
Oh, that's awesome.
So they're
Thank
here,
you.
and they're having comments, and you can ask questions.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Yeah, well, give me an inch.